In this video, we'll be implementing the get for all complete or incomplete. The functionality here should return all complete tasks or incomplete depending on the value in the URL. So if we go to Atom, so you can see here what we implemented in our last video. Scroll up. So this was getting a single task. So what we're going to do, we're just going to collapse all of these, collapse that, and collapse that. Okay, so you can see here that this was passing a task ID. So what we want to do now in this one is actually pass in a completed indicator, so or a Y or an N, I guess. So I'm just going to get rid of this white space, and this if statement is inclusive here. So what we want to do is do an else if. So else if array key exists, and then we'll pass in completed in the get. Okay, so we're just going to minimize this. So now what we're dealing with is if completed, and this parameter will have a Y or an N. So an example of the URL is /v1/tasks/complete /v1/tasks/incomplete. So these are the prettified URLs. The true URL will be /v1/task.php, and it'll be completed equals Y. That will match complete, or N, which would be incomplete. So that's why here we check to see if the completed parameter is passed in the query string, because that's at this bit here. So obviously we'll have to go back to our htaccess file and add these in at some point, but let's implement the logic first. It's very similar to the get single task. So we'll be, instead of getting the task ID, we'll be getting the completed status. We'll be checking to see if the completed status is valid, and then we'll be doing a check to see if it is a get request. This URL or this route will only accept a get request. It won't accept any other request. So if the first thing we need to do is to get the completed. So we'll just call it completed, and it is get completed. So this will get the value within the completed query string, and then we need to check the value. So if completed, that's spelled correctly, completed, yep, is not equal to, and it's a Y, and it's not equal to, completed is not equal to N. So if it's not a Y or an N, then we will send an error response basically. So response new response response set HTTP status code, and this will be a 400 error because we haven't passed in the correct value basically to this parameter. So response, response set success false, and response add message, and we'll say completed filter must be Y or N, and then we'll send it. And exit. So that is the failure response. That's fine. So if it's not a Y or an N, then it sends a default sort of response back. And now we need to check to see if it is a get response. If not, then we need to send another standard error response back. So if, remember, the server global for request method, and we need to see if it is get else, and we need to send a standard response back for a 405. So response equals new, response set HTTP status code, remember 405. So if they try and send a delete or a post to the completed route, so which would be /tasks/complete/tasks/incomplete, obviously you can only retrieve from that. So if they try and send anything but a retrieval, a get, then we'll send one back saying, send an error back saying that it's, that it's not valid. So response set success false, response add message, and request method not allowed, response send, and then exit. So we've dealt with the error. I'm just going to get rid of this white space here. So we've dealt with the error, and we'll create some space here. So now if it is a get response, we need to retrieve all tasks that have a completed Y, or depending on the route that will go down, or a completed N. So we need to attempt to retrieve these using the database connection. So remember, try and catch. So catch, and it'll be PDO exception to begin with. This will obviously contain the task exception as well, so we'll just put a placeholder in for that. Catch task exception. So that's them. So what we'll do first is set up the responses for the task exceptions and the PDO exception. So if we start response new response set HTTP status code. Now if it's a task exception, then it will be a 500 error, and then response set success false, response add. Remember, with a task exception, we had some messages automatically being output depending on what the problem was. So we'll echo them out basically. Get message and response send, and then exit. So that's that one. We'll just copy this temporarily, paste it in there. It's a 500 error message, exactly the same. Add message. So this is a PDO exception. So we'll add our own message in here, which would be something like fail to get tasks or something. Fail to get tasks. With the PDO exception, we utilize the error log function because we shouldn't get database errors, and these should be logged for our system administrators to run through. So we'll use this error log and database query error, and then we'll append on the exception error message. And then remember, it takes another parameter about where you want to show the error. So we want to show the error in the error log for PHP. You can get it to send emails and stuff like that. Be worth looking up this function on the PHP website, but we're utilizing the 0, which means just store it in the error log. So that's our two exceptions caught and handled. we will now send the database query by starting, because this is we're reading again, we're not doing any update, we're only reading, so we'll attempt to query the read database connection. So query read db, and then we will prepare, and we will, right, so what we want to do is very similar to how we retrieved a single task. So we will select the ID, the title, description, deadline, we'll come back to that in a second, completed status from our table, TBL tasks, but this time we will look where completed is equal to in the completed placeholder. Deadline, we need to format that again, so date underscore format, pass in deadline, and then we need to put the mask in, which is so it was percentage day / percentage month / percentage y percentage hour colon percentage minute. So that should be that, and then the mistake that we made last time, we need aliases, so as deadline. Okay, so select ID, completed from TBL task, we're completed, there's the placeholder completed. Okay, so we need to bind the parameter now, so query bind param. Now this time the placeholder is completed. The variable, if I scroll up slightly, is called completed. And the type this time, it's not an integer, it's a string value because it's a y or an n. So PDO, and then it was param underscore str. So that's a string parameter. So now what I want to do is execute the query. And then you can see I'm just sort of going through these fairly quick because this is very similar to what we've just done in the get single task. So we need to check the row count. So row count equals query row count, and then obviously we need to do we need to create a blank array at this point, tasks array. So task array blank array ready to return, hopefully filled with tasks, maybe. So this time we actually don't need to check if there is any returned because it'll always be successful. We're not going to say this task does not exist or no tasks exist. We're just going to return a blank tasks array with a row count of 0 because it's not really an error, it's just actually there is no data. Whereas previously we were saying get task 5, for example, but task 5 didn't exist, so that is an error. Okay, so now that we've got the blank array, we need to return all the tasks or all the rows. So we'll do the while loop again, and that was row, and it was the query fetch, and then it was the associative array, so PDO fetch associative array, and then we need to attempt to create the task. Because we're only going to try, any potential issues will be caught here, as well as obviously PDO issues, so we should be able to just attempt to create the task. So task, new task, and then we'll pass in, the first one is so it was row and then ID, row title, row description, row deadline row completed. So we've got ID, title, description, deadline, and completed. That should be a task created. And then what I want to do is add this task, so task array. We need to append it to that, so task. But we need to append the array representation of the task. Remember the helper method that we created. So return task as array. Okay, so just get rid of this white space. Now that we know where we are. Now we need to set up our return data. So return data, and this was start a blank array, and then we need to append return data, and this was rows returned, and we'll set this to the row count, and the tasks return data. Tasks should be the array of tasks, so that was task array. Oops, the variable. And now we need to send a successful response back now that we've got here. So response equals new response. Set HTTP status code. It should be a 200. Response set success true. We need to allow it to be cached because we're returning data. I mean, this is obviously dependent on your requirements, but for this, we know that we can cache the response that was set up in the response model. So response to cache, we'll say true, and we're going to set the data. Set data, and we'll pass in the return data. That should be fine, and we need to send it back. Okay, just get rid of this white space. So hopefully that should be it for this. So we'll check to see if the completed is in the query string. We'll get the completed. We'll check to make sure it's a Y or an N, because that's the only valid values. We'll then make sure it is get, and if it's not, scroll down, we'll catch that here in the else to say that no other request method is allowed. Just going to get rid of this white space. Scroll back up. And then we will try and get all of the completed or incomplete tasks from the database. We'll add it to our response, and we'll catch any exceptions if they were to occur. Okay, I'll save that. Right, now we need to create our prettified route. So we'll go back to the htaccess file. And what we want to do here is create another rewrite rule. Oops. Rewrite rule, and it's tasks, and then it's complete. So this is the first one. So this is all complete tasks. Oops, wrong one. And this is the URL we used before. controller/task.php, and it was completed, and the complete one should have a Y. And so, and on the last parameter again, so you can see here, this is the actual URL that we'll be using within the controller folder, the task.php file, and then the query string is obviously we checked for the completed parameter, and that is Y. So that should, this /tasks/complete should return all completed tasks. Now what I'm going to do here is just copy this because we want to do incomplete and where they are in. So it's exactly the same rule. It's just slash tasks slash incomplete maps to controller slash task.php where completed is equal to n. So we'll save that. So we'll open Postman up. And you can see here, this is our request from the last video. So I'm just going to close that, create a new one. HTTP localhost port 8888/v1/tasks/complete. This should return all complete tasks or completed tasks. So we'll send that. So you can see here we've got 2 tasks returned, task ID 3 and task ID 5. You can see here completed as Y for them. So we'll just quickly check the database. Just refresh that just to double check. Now looking here, the only 2 tasks that are complete are 3 and 5. So that looks like it's working. So if I quickly go back to Postman and change this to incomplete, so it's /tasks/incomplete, send that, we now get 3 returned. So that is 2, 4 and 6, and you can see here that these are not complete. So 2, 4 and 6. Now if we check the database, you can see here 2, 4 and 6 are incomplete. So that looks like it's working. So we'll quickly go back to Atom. We've created the prettyfied URLs or the roots. And we have created the completed logic basically, or the incomplete logic. So this allows you to return just complete tasks or incomplete tasks. In the next video, we'll set up so we can return all tasks. Doesn't matter whether they are complete or incomplete. We should be able to return all tasks.